Alright everyone, I feel like you get more flack when you're over the target, so when a bunch of Bernie Sanders fans are extremely miffed at me and constantly saying crazy shit on my Twitter or YouTube, it actually just encourages me to do more, and I find that actually highly amusing. Some people seem to think like it's going to stop me from speaking if they insult me. They don't really know that much about me. I have a feeling that they're fighting with two arms tied behind their back. I'd just like to put this out there. After Bernie Sanders himself, I probably have the biggest international audience of any living Vermonter. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that I've got a bigger, I know I've got a bigger audience than our idiot governor, Phil Scott. Really, Pat Leahy, I guess he'd be, or Peter Welch. I'm sure that they have a lot of people that listen to them, but it's not nearly at the same level. And admittedly, of course, when you cater to an international audience, it's a little bit different. I don't pretend that I have more fans in Vermont than Bernie Sanders has, because that would be stupid. What I would say, though, is that I'm the sort of person that keeps him up at night. I'm the sort, because I'm a Vermonter, and I rose up from abject poverty to the middle class. And I did this through personal effort, and I was hampered by government and regulation and still am, excessive taxation and all these things that he loves, and can actually point this out to people in a coherent fashion. He doesn't care about someone who's not coherent. If the person's all sorts of loopy and can't string a sentence together, like the Joe Biden or something, he doesn't worry about them so much, whether they're a Vermonter or have an audience or not. When somebody, though, is coherent, successful, and from Vermont, they become a threat to Bernie Sanders' snake oil. And that's what he is. He's snake oil Sanders. I've lived in Vermont most of my life, with the exception of when I was outside in the deep south. It's funny because every time I've lived everywhere else, it's always in a really warm climate or something. By the way, here in Amsterdam, I consider this a warm climate. You Netherlands people wouldn't understand it. I come from a place where right now there's a foot of snow on the ground and the nighttime temperature hovers around 0 degrees. And I mean 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which, is that the same as Celsius? I always forget how these temperature systems overlap. I know Kelvin has 0 actually means absolute 0. Other than that, it's a little bit confusing. Can we use one temperature measurement, please? Yeah, I know it's too much to ask. It'll never happen. But here's my life in a nutshell. I was born into poverty. Not the most stark, abject poverty, but the lower echelon of working class Appalachian small town America poverty. You don't have a lot. You're getting the generic cereal and stuff. Your dad misses a couple paychecks, you're definitely in trouble. That's where I come from. And the idea of upward mobility is something that most people don't really experience. If they move up at all, it's only a very small amount. Like, they may go from the upper tier of the working class to the lower middle class, and they feel damn happy for having done so. Or they're really poor, but they get a working class job, and at least they have their flat. That's really the limit of upward mobility in the post-war on poverty era. The government came in to give people welfare, breadcrumbs, and even the playing field for all the lower classes, and made it harder for them to actually succeed. Made it harder for those that wanted to take initiative anyway. I decided, because of poverty and because of fiscal stress on my situation, which I won't talk about for, that's deeply in the past. It involves another family member. Not immediate family, but whatever. Because of that, I had no choice but to fucking work like a dog. And so I did. And I succeeded. And almost that should be credited as one of the reasons that I ended up having a large audience, selling a lot of books, being in a situation where I'm reasonably comfortable. That's something, by the way, when I was a kid, I never really dreamed of having. I never really expected that I would rise up into the middle class. I never expected that would happen. I expected to be poor. I expected that I would, have a 9-to-5. I would get very little pay, and I'd spend the rest of my life in that basic situation. Unfortunately, my sort of success story is all too absent. It's uncommon for that to happen. I wish that everyone had that same kind of success, but unfortunately they won't. Bernie Sanders would like to tell me that the reason that I started having poverty in the first place is a corporation. Some billionaire is responsible for my problems, but really it was the government. And Bernie Sanders wants to make that government bigger. My main fear, though, about Bernie Sanders has nothing to do with his snake oil, which is what it is. It's Scientology economics that he's peddling. It's worse than voodoo economics because people should know better at the very least. It's a bunch of bullshit. His economic views are terrible. He just got heckled on stage in Nevada just the other day by members of the vegan lobby, actually. Some chick took her shirt off and was like rambling, and she had like, dairy kills or dairy equals murder or something on, painted on herself, and there was another girl who tried to steal the microphone, and it was all very funny. And surprisingly, he did better than he did with those BLM chicks in 2016, where he just stood to the side looking very solemn and let them harass and rant at his audience. That looked weak. This time he actually held onto the microphone and sort of stood off to the side and was like, enough is enough. Give him credit for that where credit's due. It's funny seeing an almost 80-year-old man hold onto the microphone when some crazy chick's trying to steal it from him. Anyway, my biggest worry, it boils down to a little bit of state pride, and I've explained this. I'm not worried about Bernie Sanders as he is competing with a bunch of far leftists in the Dem Party. A lot of people aren't even paying attention to the Dem primaries, let's face it. To tell the truth, the primaries have become boring already. With the exception of the possibility that in Nevada, I guess they're using an app similar to in Iowa. Oh God, I hope it fails. I hope that the DNC gets egg on its face again. I hope that screwy shit happens. I hope Bernie Sanders manages to get edged out by a point by Buttigieg and they blame the app and go crazy. I hope that happens. But I don't want him to be on a national stage. I am worried that Bernie Sanders will become the Dem nominee, get completely trounced, and be a goddamn embarrassment, and it will reflect badly upon my state, because people will start, I know what the Fox News people say, well, it's because he's from that hippie goddamn far left state of Vermont, and they'll probably try to blame that even though he was born and raised in Brooklyn. Oh yeah, Vermont will be big in the news, but for all the wrong reasons. Instead of being known for, first state to legalize gay marriage without the courts getting involved. We've got all these green energy projects. We've got lots of nice trees and stuff. Instead of being known for something pleasant, we'll be known for being the home of this crazy socialist that basically crushed the Democratic Party by being an abysmal failure. That's the other thing. You've got to understand, and you can see this if you look at his polling numbers, Bernie Sanders is not nearly as popular as people want to make believe. That's the other thing. He has an echo chamber around him. He has a Twitter and Reddit echo chamber that thinks he's wonderful and thinks that other Democrats think the same way, but most people would just hold their nose and vote for the bastard if he ended up being the nominee. And some of them wouldn't even do that. They wouldn't be able to hold their nose effectively enough, and they'd say, PU, this stinks too much. I'm staying home tonight. No, I don't want that to happen. By the way, keeping Trump accountable, in all honesty, disclaimer here, I'll probably vote for Trump. Keeping him, though, accountable, keeping his toes to the fire to make sure he does the right thing requires that there be some semblance of resistance to him. You think it's coming from Pelosi? Inept Pelosi. Silent Tom Perez. The DNC. These people aren't holding him accountable because all they can do is parrot over and over, Orange Man bad, Orange Man bad. It would be nice to have a Dem nominee that could challenge him a little bit so that he wouldn't get so complacent. I'm worried that Trump will steamroll Bernie Sanders if he's nominated and go on to think he has such a mandate that he can piss all over everybody. And then maybe he will do crazy shit. I am worried. I mean, he is a Republican. So crazy shit does apply. Now, doesn't it? I like him better than fucking warmongering McCain Republican or a greasy Mitt Romney, but he still decided to join the GOP. Still a sort of a rich old dude, and if he's in his second term, of course, there's less to keep him accountable anyway. As a non-Republican, non-conservative, I'd say it'd be nice to have a Democratic Party that operates with a semblance of sanity. And Bernie Sanders is a symbol of the Democrats running themselves in a circle and convincing themselves that what they read on Twitter is the national, sort of ethos, that's the way the whole nation feels. It's not, I think. Bernie Sanders is worried about people who are intelligent enough to understand his economics won't work, number one, who actually have a story of having succeeded, and not having done so, by the way, with help from government, but in the spite of government pushback. I get excessively taxed. There's a self-employment tax on my sort of income, for one thing. There are heavy regulations now being proposed for Silicon Valley. The government, neoliberal as it is constantly trying to partner with Silicon Valley to throw people like me under the bus, to sanitize the internet and censor things. And it shouldn't be happening. That's sort of a symbol of what Bernie Sanders in that sense represents. And another part of it, ultimately, it's self-serving. Yeah, I think that he would fuck the economy of the United States. I mean, if the Democrats ever allowed him to put forth his agenda, which I don't think that they would. That's the other problem. Let's say that we get President Bernie. President Bernard Sanders, he takes office. And he gets stymied by his own party. What are his fans going to do? They're going to cry foul and they might get violent. They might burn the town to the ground. Well, no, I don't want that to happen. I think it's better to deflate their sensibilities now. Let them down. Let them know this isn't going to happen. The Democrats are not a socialist movement. They're a liberal movement and have been for a long time. They're not going to get their way, and then let them be like spoiled brats for a while and whine and complain, and then ultimately sit at home or vote Green Party. And by the way, let the Democrats take their lumps for having allowed him to run in the first place. They chose to allow him to put the D after his name, knowing full well that he would run. They chose to do that, knowing it was a bad idea, and allowed him to do so anyway. Well then, fuck him. Let him suffer. Tom Perez and Nancy Pelosi need to be kicked aside. They need to be thrown out of the party altogether as miserable failures they are. Give me a party of JFK, because my natural forte is not voting for Republicans. And when Trump leaves, it's very likely you're going to get some crazy evangelical or some nut job in the position after he leaves. They won't be Donald Trump. Trump was a business dem from Manhattan back in the 90s. He's not a far-right dude. He's not a fanatic. Bernie Sanders can pretend that he is because it's red meat to his base, but he knows that it's not true. Bernie Sanders would have praised Donald Trump probably years ago. Well, he's a billionaire, but he seems to have a conscience. He actually cares a little bit about the little people. And I really like The Apprentice. That would have been him being honest. But now he's running for the presidency, so honesty, I guess, at some point goes out the window. But I'm one of Bernie Sanders' many collective nightmares. And one of his worst nightmares, probably, because I have a major international audience. I actually can reach, 250,000 people on a day-to-day basis. How many Vermonters can say that, dude? And I was actually raised in Vermont. He was raised in Brooklyn. So there's another problem. Another New Yorker wants to grift on Vermont politics. This happens very, very often. You get people from upstate New York, or even New York City, in Sanders' case, they go to UVM or something. They come for college and then they never leave. And then they think that they're an authentic Vermonter because they wear a flannel shirt. I don't begrudge someone, by the way, the title of Vermonter if they're, staying in the state long term. But I mean, come on, he was already, I think, in his 20s at the time. Very, very Brooklyn accent, we'll say, and is just all around. I mean, he's not exactly farming dairy cows or something. Yeah. I don't know. I just find the whole subject to be a little bit amusing. Yeah, Bernie Sanders is a threat. Go fuck yourself. That's about all. Peace out.